Okay, so there's been a lot of interest in the recent videos that I published about Victoria Falls, which is one of the natural wonders, and I did a solo trip there. It is spread across two countries, so you can see Victoria Falls from Zambia or Zimbabwe in Africa. And some of the differences of the two, like it just depends on what side you want to go to. I will say Livingston has a lot more chain hotels, not a lot, but more than you would see on the Zimbabwe side. And also, a lot of people want to go to Devil's Pool, which is on the Livingston side, where you see all those pictures where people are hanging off kind of like the edge of the cliff of the waterfall. That's not something I wanted to do. So it all depends on like what you want to do while there. But I just wanted to go over the logistics on how to get over there. So when I planned the trip, I planned it like a week ahead of time. I'm sorry, not a week ahead of time, a month ahead of time. And I flew on Delta to Johannesburg, and it was a nonstop flight. It was about 16 hours. And the flight, at the time, it was kind of pricey, but I ended up using some of my points to reduce the amount for the flight. And then I ended up also using the points to kind of use it so I can upgrade to Comfort Plus because that was probably the longest flight I've done, 16 hours. So I wanted to get the first row of Comfort Plus. So I flew into Johannesburg. At the time, there was not a Cape Town route, but right now they do have an Atlanta to Cape Town route. So it depends on which way you want to go. I will say from Atlanta to Cape Town, it is a lot more expensive than if you fly into Johannesburg. And so I flew into Johannesburg. I left on a Friday evening. I didn't get to Johannesburg until literally Saturday afternoon. I had some time in between my flights, so I went to an airport lounge there because I have priority pass, so I was able to go to an airport lounge. And then I used South African Airways to get to Durban, which was about an hour and some change, and flew there and stayed there roughly 2 nights. And then I went to Victoria Falls from Durban, which was another hour and some change. And it was also on South African Airways. So if you are planning to visit, look at some of the local carriers because sometimes they don't always show up on Google Flights. And so that is what I did for as far as getting there. So I essentially took 3 flights to get to Victoria Falls. And so I stayed there about 2 nights. And some things that I didn't know about whenever you're going into like visit an African country is that they have load shedding, and that is where some of the areas will not have power because they're trying to balance, basically load shed the electricity throughout. So wherever you're going, check for hotels and understand if they, fall in that, and if when their scheduling is and stuff like that. I think the hotel I stayed at, I didn't notice it, or either I wasn't there when it happened. Some hotels have backup generators, so you don't really notice it. So, like I said, I flew into VFA, is the airport code for Victoria Falls in Zimbabwe, and I ended up getting a Casa visa, and you'll see that in my upcoming video. The Casa Uni Visa gives you access if you want to go back and forth between Zambia and Zimbabwe. So that was $50. And they wanted to make sure that I had a like not crumpled bill and I had to use US dollars. So I gave them a bill, and then they ended up saying, you do have another one because this one isn't, they didn't accept it because it was so crumpled just out of my pocket. And that visa allowed me to go across the Victoria Falls Bridge and cross into Zambia. So if you have goals of being able to go between the two countries, um, definitely look into that visa so that you can across there easily to the two countries, and I think it includes Botswana as well. And I stayed in the Safari Victoria Falls Safari Lodge, and you'll see that in this upcoming video, and you see some of it in the previous video that I posted. And on that hotel is also the Boma restaurant. The Boma restaurant has the dinner and drum show that I posted about that a lot of people seem to be interested in. It is in a buffet, and they also have, like I said, a drum show. So it's really interactive. Some people say that it's very touristy, but I enjoyed it. It is on the same campus as the Safari Lodge that I stayed in. But I still had to take a bus over there. But a lot of people who aren't staying over there can book a tour. I've included the tour information in the description of this video. And so that's what I did as far as like logistics to get over there. And also, I noted in the previous video, my cell phone didn't work over there, so I probably should have looked more into getting a SIM card from a local carrier because I had a phone that allowed for dual SIMs, but I just opted to, since I wasn't there that long, I just opted to use the Wi-Fi in the hotel or wherever else I stayed. And then I visited Victoria Falls. There's two entrances. One is going to be in Zambia, one's going to be in Zimbabwe, and I visited from the Zimbabwe side. And so that tour took up most, like half of the day. I was there to about 1 o'clock, and then I met up with someone that you'll see in the next video as far as crossing over the bridge. So I will say it is a very fun experience. I did feel safe traveling solo. I felt more safe than I did in Durban because, as I mentioned, I started out in Johannesburg. And going to Durban, I didn't stay in Johannesburg at all just because I'd heard some things about Johannesburg, but it turns out that Durban is something I should have been warned about. Durban was not very, it wasn't a good time for me. So I really felt like once I got to Victoria Falls, that was really kind of my first really glimpse into an African country. Because if you don't know, Durban is in South Africa, but is one of like the most largest countries with a large Indian population. So it's nice, it has a beach and everything, but that was my first stop, overnight stop. So it didn't really feel like I was in Africa yet until I got to Victoria Falls. So it was safe. I did enjoy going to Boma. Boma can be kind of pricey. It is like roughly, I think, 80 something dollars just included like the tour and stuff. And which the tour would include you getting a ride over there because, like I said, it's on the Safari Lodge property. Even I had to take a tour bus or a bus over to the restaurant. And some other things to note is if the way I made this route work is it was tough because some of the locations or some of the airports I couldn't get flights to without stopping back in Johannesburg. So I just made kind of a loop from Johannesburg to Durban, from Durban to Victoria Falls, and then from Victoria Falls to Cape Town, and then back to Johannesburg. So I want to say the tickets were roughly $400 both legs. The one getting to Cape Town was the most expensive. It was on a smaller plane, and you'll see the size of the plane in the upcoming video. So make sure you subscribe to this channel, turn on the notifications so you'll be notified of when I post that video. But you can check out the video for Boma Restaurant, the Dinner and Drum show. I think a lot of people are interested in it because going to Africa and like some countries in Africa in December is kind of ideal, especially when you're coming from the States and you're trying to get away from cold weather, just depending on where you are. So I think that's why the restaurants become really searched a lot. And people want to know, like, is it worth it? I would say it's worth it, but it just depends on how much time you have. And then you'll see in the next video, I also did a sunset cruise. So seeing the Victoria Falls and definitely doing a sunset cruise were like top of mind for me. And some people wanted to go bungee jumping, and some people wanted to ride the train that goes between the two countries. It's like a train that provides food and tea and all that stuff, and it's kind of expensive. So I would not recommend it. Um, I think I've heard that's overrated, but it just depends on what you want to do. And so those are some of the top ones. And some people have gone an actual safari to Botswana there. And so those are different things. But I was only there for 2 nights, so I didn't have a lot of time. But if I go again, I would definitely look into some of these different options. But planning this trip, you definitely have to kind of check all the options. Like I said, I wasn't able to get certain flights the way I wanted to, so I had to make this kind of circle, and it kind of determined which airport I wanted to fly into for Victoria Falls, Livingston. It wasn't many options to fly out. There was maybe like one flight to Cape Town, but and also when you go to Victoria Falls, you can work out with your hotel to get a shuttle to the property. And my hotel actually provided a shuttle into the city so I could go shopping as well. And it's a really nice hotel. You see it in the video that's linked in the description. There are just you get a view of the watering hole. So depending on the time of year you go, you can see elephants and other animals drinking out of the water hole. But when I went, it wasn't in, like, the elephants had already migrated. So that was nice. And there wasn't even a TV in my hotel, and I didn't notice it because I had not even been in the room long enough. So that's that. And then, so definitely look into the visa, talk with your doctor about any shots that you might need for visiting Zambia and Zimbabwe. Because I wasn't going to be there that long, I didn't get as many shots as typically you would need. And you always want to check with the passports website. It's the travel.state.gov, and you can see what vaccinations are needed for the destination and required, and entry requirements and visas that are required. So definitely check out travel.state.gov for that information. So like I said, I worked with my doctors to see which ones were needed as far as vaccinations were needed to go to, like, all of the countries that I visited in Africa. So that's kind of like the logistics. I use South African Airways for the most part. I think there was another one that I used, but I'll get into that at a later time. That I flew from Cape Town to Johannesburg. It was kind of reminded me of like Spirit and Frontier in the US, because it was like a no frills thing with the airline, like charging for water, charging for everything. So I'll talk about that in a later video. But in the meantime, check out Victoria Falls Part 1 and the Boma restaurant. I may do a video on Durban. It was my least favorite part of the trip, but I did get to go to visit the Valley of 1,000 Hills in Durban and got to kind of see the Zulu culture and the Zulu tribe there. So I may do a video on Durban, but it was probably my least favorite. And only because I got chased around by a local there. Still don't know why to this day, but I think the locals tried to speak their Zulu language to me, and I had on shades, but I guess because I didn't respond back, they immediately were like, "Yeah, that's a tourist." And also, I was talking with the police there, and they thought maybe it was because they could see my phone had English or something on it. So, very interesting experience. I'm not going back to Durban anytime soon. So, I may do a video on that, but for now, I just started with Victoria Falls of my trip because, like I said, I was solo. Um, didn't know anyone there, and there was very crazy beginning to my trip to Africa. So stay tuned, turn on the bell for notifications, and check out the two videos first in the description. But I wanted to give you like the logistics on how to get there, because when you go to anywhere in Africa, you really have to budget your time, budget on your calendar. I was able to maximize my time there because I flew on a Friday. So when I arrived on Saturday, I had that whole weekend, and then I came back on the following Sunday night. So that put me back in the US on Monday, early Monday morning, like at 6 a.m. So it was a lot. I literally had a lot of flights, but it was worth it in the end. I was definitely tired when I returned. So stay tuned to see how the trip went. See you later. Bye.